So today we are looking at shoe sizing and fitting as part of the bike fit process. John here came in a couple of weeks ago, and one of the issues that he was complaining about was just comfort in the shoe and wondering whether it was the right shoe for him. So obviously as part of that process, what I want to do is just look and see whether the shoe fits, both in terms of just the shape of the shoe in relation to the foot, but also how it looks on the bike and where the cleat position needs to sit, and just that foot pedal interface there. So looking at the size of the shoe in the first place, we can see that this is a Euro 43. So what we'll do first is just run through a little bit of processes and how we would look at the foot we are dealing with. So if you want to come and stand up for me first. So looking at initially the shape of the foot, we see there's slight differences from left to right side. The arch height has got some differences to it, and the width of the foot looks different from one side to the other. Certainly, you know, the first impressions are that the forefoot looks quite wide, sort of from where his first metatarsal is on the inside of his foot to out onto the base of his fifth metatarsal there, which would usually call that being the widest point of the foot. So there's a couple of ways that we would like to sort of at least clarify what length and width his foot is, and the way that we do that is either using primarily traditional Brannock device, which is what you would usually go when you're getting measured up for your school shoes. You would use this little device. So we'll look at this in sort of a semi-weighted position to start with John. So if you have a sit down there again for me, and if you pop your right heel into the back of the device there. So where we sit there, so remember we were looking at the overall foot length, and the shoe that John had selected was a size 43. In this semi-weighted position here with his foot just resting in neutral, we are literally at a 40, or just touching beyond that at the end of his big toe there, with his heel sort of comfortably back into the back of the device there, the Brannock device. We can also establish what his arch length is here, which is again at 40, so his arch and foot length are pretty symmetrical in that sense. The width of his foot is the interesting one. So if we sort of consider that in this position here his foot is a size 40, if we go out to where 40 measures on the width side of things, we're looking out at basically a 2E, a double E width. So we're definitely sitting on the wide side in relation to his foot length. So it's all relative to foot length to foot width. So his right foot is nearer to a size 40 and a double E width. So in relation to what John has done, what a lot of people do in order to get their foot inside a traditional cycling shoe, regardless of the brand, they go up 2 or possibly 3 sizes in terms of length just to sort of achieve the width, and so it doesn't feel squished. But what you end up with is then a big space down either the back behind the heel, so your rear foot isn't stable inside the rear heel cup, or you've got a big space at the end of the toe as well here. And then, you know, you're limited in terms of where the cleat is going to sit effectively under the correct part, of where we would ideally put it underneath the forefoot. So if we were going to swap over here and look at the left side, we've got a slightly longer foot. So again, a little different here. So we're closer to 41. We were back at 40 on that side. Again, arch length is pretty symmetrical at 41 here, and width at 41. We're not quite as wide, but we're still sort of out between an E and a double E width when we're looking at this. So a little bit of a shorter, fatter foot on the right side. You're welcome. But we've also started working a little bit with Lake shoes just recently. So in terms of from a bike fitting perspective, it gives us the chance to at least, as a brand, be able to be a little bit more specific with the shape and the last of the shoes, and different width fittings to be able to cater for a foot of this type, which is not unusual. So to look at simply, so what we've ended up doing is going for a 41 wide in this sort of mountain bike cross gravel bike shoe, so that we are going to try to cater for the width of the foot, but then not have to go too long. So Lake's one of the few brands, if the only brand, that will actually change the last of the shoe underneath the foot to cater for giving it appropriate support. Certainly a lot of brands and manufacturers, they do some wide fitting shoes, but all they tend to do is increase the size of the upper from a volume perspective. So actually what your foot rests on doesn't get any broader. And you can see in terms of the simple width of one to the other here, sort of how narrow the base of support is across this traditional shoe versus the width that we're going to basically try to place underneath John's foot here, which, you know, we want to give the foot a little bit more comfort as well as stability and shape to it. So what we've done is prescribed him a 41 wide. We can back that up further, so we're 2 sizes smaller. Again, Lake have their own little device here when it comes to actually taking a measurement. So we can do this by placing the heel on the back of the measurement device here. And if you come and stand up, so you've got a little bit more weight through it, so we can see if the foot actually deforms under a little bit of load as well. So what we do is tend to add in sort of between 7 to 10 mil on top of the basic length of the foot there to accommodate. And again, we're looking out at between a 40.5 and a 41, but bearing in mind that this foot is a little bit narrower and longer, we want to sort of, you know, make sure that this left foot isn't getting too squished inside that shoe as well. Also, if we wanted to, you know, compare that relatively to width, so if you pop your foot off of there and then just put that, remember we're talking about that first metatarsal and the base of that fifth here, so we can actually look at that relevant width of the foot as well, and pick that off of there again for me. So if we're talking again between a 40 and a 41, then we're definitely on into the black on both of those measurements, which again indicates that it's appropriate to go into a wider fitting shoe. So what we're going to do is set these up now, get the cleats on, and then dial that into his bike position as well as part of the process.
I'm 60 in the early 60s, I can't shave my legs.
Yeah. So now that we are up on the bike, we're just wanting to, so I've had a little bit of a guesstimation in terms of where the cleat needs to go from a fore and aft point of view. And just confirming that, usually what we'll do is just look to see where the pedal spindle sits across where the metatarsals are. So, you know, traditionally in the past we would try to, you know, old school would be a little bit, try to line the first metatarsal up with the pedal spindle. Usually what we do now, which is usually more comfortable for the vast majority of riders, is to put the pedal spindle just on the back part or even slightly behind the first met, which I can feel through a shoe here, and the center of the pedal spindle in this 3 o'clock position will just sit across it, and then the fifth is a little bit behind. So we're kind of across the ball of the foot, so the center of the pedal spindle is kind of closer to being in the center or underneath the third met head if we were splitting the difference across the two there. So generally, you know, if you find that you've got pressure on your toes, then moving the cleats rearward is a good way of helping to solve some of that pressure if you've got it. But we can see that that this shoe accommodates the width of the foot comfortably there. We're not pushing out against the side of it. Lengthwise, you know, it holds the foot well around his heel. There isn't a gap down the back of his Achilles like there was in his shoes that, funnily enough, were 2 sizes bigger. And then his toe, you know, again, is just at an appropriate length and size. So, you know, we've got a nice fitting shoe. What we're going to do now is just make sure we're all dialed in. Again, shoes can have different stack heights. The cleat position may be slightly different. So we want to make sure that, you know, saddle height or fore and aft position may just need a tiny amount of adjustments just to see that the whole system is kind of dialed in together.